Hello and welcome to the Political Brief. I'm Molly Hall. Coming up in this week's show, a bromance blooms in Washington, but President Macron's official visit to the U.S. leaves Iran's nuclear deal in limbo. And the French Parliament passes a controversial immigration law. Plus, as Emmanuel Macron wraps up his first year in office, the French economy is on the upswing. But how much credit should he get? First, it was a highly anticipated trip to the United States. Emmanuel Macron, the first foreign leader invited by U.S. President Donald Trump for an official state visit. Now, the 3 days were full of public displays of affection, plenty of handshakes, and even playful grooming. But beyond friendship, President Macron was hoping to influence President Trump on crucial issues like U.S.-EU trade relations and the Iran nuclear deal.
I like him a lot.
The French charm offensive doesn't seem to have swayed Donald Trump. 3 days spent trying to gain key policy concessions from his American host, most notably to remain within the Iran deal. But by Wednesday evening, President Emmanuel Macron seemed pessimistic.
If you look rationally at President Trump's statements as a whole, it seems to me that he will not do his utmost to preserve the Iran deal.
Macron arrived in Washington floating the idea of a more far-reaching deal that would seek to address Iranian influence in the region and curb their ballistic capabilities. But to no avail, as Donald Trump repeated his campaign mantra.
And the Iran deal is a disaster. They're testing missiles.
On May 12th, Trump will announce whether to slap fresh sanctions on Tehran, effectively killing the existing agreement, while Russia and Iran have both rejected the idea of a new deal.
Well, Emmanuel Macron then admitting he may not have convinced the U.S. president to stick to the Iranian nuclear deal. But after flaunting his friendship with Donald Trump, Macron pushed back against the U.S. president's America First agenda. This in a rare speech to U.S. Congress.
A standing ovation before he had even spoken. French President Emmanuel Macron received a warm welcome as he made a rare address to the joint houses of Congress. Macron began by recalling the common bonds from the earliest days of the United States. But Macron did not shy away from pressing the US president. He urged the US not to retreat from the world, a pushback against Trump's America First agenda.
It is a critical moment. If we do not act with urgency as a global community, I am convinced that the international institutions, including the United Nations and NATO, will no longer be able to exercise their mandate.
The French president addressed a Congress split on the issue of the Iran nuclear deal. Trump had vowed to pull the United States out of the 2015 pact. Macron admitted he thought it was not a perfect deal, but must remain in place.
We should not abandon it without having something substantial and more substantial instead. That's my position. That's why France will not leave the JCPOA, because we signed it. Your president and your country will have to take in the current days and weeks its own responsibilities regarding this issue.
Macron pressed the US to rethink trade tariffs against European steel and aluminium that will come into force in the coming weeks. He also took aim at Trump's decision to walk away from the Paris Climate Accord.
By polluting the oceans, not mitigating CO2 emissions, and destroying our biodiversity, we are killing our planet. Let us face it, there is no planet B.
The 3-day visit has been marked by glittering dinners and intimate images of the leaders planting trees. Of the European leaders, Macron has shown a particularly warm rapport with the US president. In his speech, he called the closeness between the two nations a very special relationship, a term more often linked to the bond between the US and the United Kingdom, a sign perhaps of Macron's new transatlantic ambitions.
So new transatlantic ambitions. Well, some here in France say it would be wise to focus elsewhere in today's changing geopolitical climate. Former Prime Minister Dominique de Villepin says a cozy relationship with the U.S. could backfire.
The world is changing. There's no longer an Atlantic alliance that structures and dominates the world. There's now a divide between liberal democracies that are having difficulties and authoritarian regimes, especially the rise of China. And in this sense, we tend to neglect a bit this new axis of a changing world. It's China, it's Russia, and Turkey. This is the emerging world. And in this sense, the fact of being seen as too close to the Americans may be or may appear to be an impediment for French diplomacy.
In other news this week, the French Parliament passed an immigration law. Now, the controversial legislation sparked the first rumblings of revolt in the president's ruling centrist party. Mario Sofos has the details.
I declare the vote open.
Approved by a large majority.
For 228 against 139, the National Assembly has adopted the bill.
But a majority which has cracked for the first time since Emmanuel Macron's party stormed to victory in June's parliamentary elections. Amongst the most controversial elements of the law is the plan to double from 45 to 90 days the maximum amount of time that migrants, including children, can be held in administrative detention. Another divisive proposal is the prosecution of those who help asylum seekers to enter France illegally in what is known as a crime of solidarity. Plans that are likely to have influenced the 14 abstentions and single no vote within the president's own majority, despite warnings from the party whip. After voting against the law, Republic on the Move member Jean-Michel Clément quit the party in protest. Yet the Interior Minister Gérard Collomb argues that the law will allow for more efficient and fair asylum applications and better controlled immigration, with the legislation reducing the waiting time for approval from 11 to 6 months. The opposition cried foul, arguing the law still dehumanized migrants.
This is an inhumane reform which is going to make reception conditions harder for all migrants, including asylum seekers in this country on all fronts. It's just astonishing.
A sentiment that was reiterated by the NGO Amnesty International just minutes after the law was passed, stating that it was dangerous for migrants and asylum seekers. Last year alone, France received a record 100,000 asylum applications, an increase of over 17% compared to 2016. The bill is now expected to reach the Senate in June.
Meanwhile, railway strikes grind on here in France. Now, after ruling out dialogue with rail unions last week, France's Prime Minister, Edouard Philippe, has had an apparent change of heart and announced a series of meetings with unions and SNCF officials.
Giving in to pressure, French Prime Minister Edouard Philippe proposed meeting with rail union officials after they decided to suspend talks with Transport Minister Elisabeth Borne.
I hope that these meetings proceed in respect of our previous dialogue within the company and the sector, along with the Minister of Transport. On the 7th of May, I will also meet with SNCF executives, representatives of the rail sector, as well as those of the passengers and delivery services.
At the heart of these discussions will undoubtedly be SNCF's €46.6 billion debt, which French President Emmanuel Macron wants to tackle by phasing out the state rail company's job-for-life contracts and opening it up to competition by 2023 in alignment with EU regulations. Edouard Philippe has confirmed that the government is leaning towards taking on debt repayments gradually. However, a government report published in February stated that if they pay the whole sum, the country's public debt would increase by 2%. Many rail workers are still determined to fight government reforms, yet there has been a considerable decline in the number of strikers since last Thursday, with nearly 18% participating on Tuesday, compared to just under 40% on the first day of strikes. An IFOP poll carried out when the strikes began revealed that 43% of the French public were in support which the strikers are now relying upon. The strikes are set to run until the 28th of June.
Railway reform is just one of the ways the French government plans to help strengthen the economy. And new figures out this week have shown another drop in unemployment here in France. Now, this is the latest in a series of good economic news that will help influence the image of President Macron's first year in office. But is he really to thank for all of this? Joining us now with the answer is our business editor, Stephen Carroll. Stephen, firstly, walk us through, give us a picture of the current state of affairs in the French economy.
Well, things have been picking up for the French economy. Let's start by looking at the headline growth figures. For the last year, in 2017, the French economy grew by 1.9%. That's the fastest rate of growth that we've seen since 2011, and it has been, as you can see from this chart, a growing situation over recent years, picking up very slowly, but getting to that rate of 1.9% for 2017. On the unemployment front as well, unemployment has been a big problem in France. The unemployment rate was hovering for years around 10%, but it has been coming down too in recent months. At the end of last year, the unemployment rate in mainland France was 8.6%. That's the best that it's been in years as well. This improved situation really helps to solve one of the big problems the French government has had over recent years, and that's getting its budget deficit in line with EU rules. It needs to be below 3%. It's fallen to that level for the first time in a decade in recent months. That's helping to solve a big beef the European Commission has with France, and that's keeping its spending in line.
So how much credit then goes to President Macron?
Well, when you talk to business people, they do tell you they're happy that he won the election. They're more optimistic, and more optimism in business is good for spending, for investment, for hiring. And President Macron has pressed ahead with big reforms to the economy, issues like reforming the labour market, and that is helping. The IMF has said so as well. But he has also to thank his predecessor, François Hollande, as well, because François Hollande had two major economic reforms, one in 2013, one in 2014. They gave big tax cuts to businesses to encourage them to hire and to invest. And economists say we're really only seeing the fruit of some of those reforms now. And that's leading to an overall picture of improved health for the French economy. Globally, of course, things are doing better too. That helps as well. All of this does give the current government that little bit more leeway to implement their reforms coming up. They've two big dossiers on the table they're going to have to deal with. One is a reform of unemployment benefit, and the other is reform of the pension system.
All right, Stephen, thank you for that analysis there. And that does wrap things up for this edition of the Political Brief. Thank you for joining us here on France 24.
En France 24 nos esforzamos por brindar la mejor información hecha por periodistas de Latinoamérica y del resto del mundo.
France 24, c'est l'info mondiale, partout, toujours à portée de clic.
We look at how technology is shaping the future, and we show you the latest gadgets you can soon get your hands on.
نقدم لكم الاقتصاد بطريقة مختلفة، نبسط المفاهيم والمصطلحات كي تكتمل الصورة لديكم.
Aquí puedo hablar de medio ambiente, no solo de los problemas que afectan a nuestro planeta, sino también de iniciativas y soluciones que a veces no tienen espacio en televisión.
La différence sur France 24, c'est l'idée du reportage. Nos grands reportages, vous ne les verrez nulle part ailleurs.